Hello, Kiwanis leaders. This video is about assumptions and the importance of checking assumptions. Now, an assumption is something that is treated as though it is true without proof. I'm going to give an example. I'll make up a story that is from a generic work type situation, given that those of you watching may have very different backgrounds. So let's say I'm giving a presentation at a work meeting, and I'm presenting on a report that I think is really important for the company. Maybe it's going to save us a lot of money. It's going to really help our mission, our goals. And I'm very excited about this. As I am speaking, I noticed that a supervisor who's a few levels up, who has quite a lot of power and say in what happens in this organization, is sitting a few rows back. And this person, as I'm speaking, looks down, look out a window, they put their hand over their mouth and they breathe like this. And then before I am quite done talking, they interrupt me and say, "Thank you, let's go ahead and have you write a full report on this and we'll get on to the next meeting item." I leave the meeting. I am upset. I can't believe they just cut me off. And I think, okay, this person, first of all, they're like looking away and yawning. They weren't even listening. And you know what? I don't think they liked what I was saying. I don't think they actually care about this. I thought it was quite important, but you know what? They probably don't even like me. They don't like what I'm contributing here. They don't value me. And this starts to seem like, yeah, I bet that's what happened. And as a result, I decide I'm not going to put that much work into this report that they've requested because they're not going to read it anyways. Like, they don't even care. They were just saying that as a filler to move on to the next thing. What just happened? I moved up what is called the ladder of inference. This means that, and if you are a visual person, you can check your documents that go along with this lesson. There's a visual of the ladder of inference. You can pause and make sure you get that in front of you right now. So the ladder of inference, at the very bottom of the ladder is actual reality, actual facts. These are things that could be recorded by a camera, something objective. Now from there, see, our brains have so much data to take in that we can't pay attention to all of it. For example, right now, are you aware of the pulsing of blood in your right ear canal? It's been happening your whole life, and maybe you've never stopped to notice it, but that's partly because our brains are trying to be sane and not pay attention to every possible thing. I don't know if that can even happen to our brains. So we select which parts of reality we pay attention to. We prioritize certain things. So actual reality, selected reality that I'm filtering for. And based on that reality that I'm bothering to pay attention to, I start to interpret it. So I interpreted the supervisors looking away, their hand over their mouth as they're not listening, they're bored, etc. I start to make assumptions. They must not like what I was saying. Maybe they don't even like me. And I draw conclusions. Yeah, I guess they don't like me. Then I just believe that this is true. It's my belief. And I start to take actions based on that belief. Maybe I'm not really giving work my all anymore because I think there's no point. They're not going to really listen to me. I submit a report that's just kind of halfway done because technically it's complete, but I didn't bother to really put much effort into it. And these actions result in outcomes. And so there's that track of what do the actions result in, but also this whole ladder creates what's called a referential loop a lot of the times. Because I'm so certain that this supervisor doesn't like what I'm contributing, or maybe they don't like me, I start to look for information that confirms my assumption, that confirms my bias. So let's say I walk into the building and they are getting into the elevator ahead of me and the doors closed. They don't hold the doors open to let me in. And I think, see, there they go again. They don't like me. What's the deal? And actually, maybe they just didn't see me, but anything this person does that seems like, oh, I could interpret it to confirm what I already believe, I'm probably going to do that. Now, how will these actions impact me? It might be that I'm completely wrong about my interpretation, about my assumptions and beliefs, etc. It could be that this person actually loved what I was saying. They were looking down because they were thinking, oh my gosh, this is so good. Yeah, we should have been looking at this all along. And when they interrupted me, what they actually meant was, hold on, I want to make sure I get all of this. Please, like, write it all out. So not only can I look at it, but I can show it to other leaders because this is such good information. Also, we don't have much time left in this meeting. And so let's get on to the other things, but I want to make sure that this gets really good attention. Well, I actually had an ally and somebody who was cheering me on, but once I submit a report that's not well done and I start to disengage, then I've just thwarted my goals. So we don't know which one might be true. So how do we find out? First of all, know that assumptions are a phenomenon. People go up this ladder of inference all the time, often without knowing. And part of it is that in the absence of information, humans are wired to make up story. Our brains just want to feel better. Even if better is, well, I guess they don't like me, it's something to attach to that makes sense of the reality around me, because not knowing can be more uncomfortable for our brains. So whatever the case, my brain's trying to just make sense of the reality around me. So I've made up a story. So know that you are likely to do that when things aren't clear, and everybody is. So if you think you might be making an assumption, what you can do is, on your own, you can look at this ladder of inference and think, okay, what is it I'm thinking? And why do I think that? This could apply to coming up with a strategy for how your organization is going to address a problem or grow. It doesn't have to be an interpersonal issue. It could be regarding strategy and how you're interpreting data, actual like numbers about your organization, for example. So use the ladder as a tool and decide, okay, what are the assumptions I'm making? What beliefs do I have? Let me check and kind of work your way down the ladder. What is that based off of? And see if you can really justify what you're thinking. You can also talk to a level-headed colleague or friend to talk through what your thinking is. Sometimes the act of speaking it out loud helps you realize when you've skipped steps. You can also have the other person say, wait, hold on, how do you know that? Then that can help you figure things out. Another thing you can do if you think you might be making assumptions is ask the person, even if you don't use the language of assumptions. In the case of that meeting, I can say, hey, what did you think of that meeting? Might say something like, I had this assumption that you were bored in the meeting, were you? Or what did you think of my report, etc. So there are ways of asking to clear things up more or less right away. Or if you're really upset, wait, calm down, and come back to it later. If you and your team use the language of assumptions and the ladder of inference, which could be great to add in, and say you think the whole team in a meeting is moving up the ladder of inference as they're coming up with a strategy or as they're figuring out what to do about a person or a situation or about a community, you can say, hold on, I think we might be moving up the ladder of inference. Let's check, or let's slow down. And lastly, you can do what Dr. Brene Brown, a sociologist who studies these sorts of things, suggests, which is if you realize you're making up a story, you can write out what she calls a stormy first draft. So let yourself be upset. And you don't need to be reasonable at all. You can just sit in your state of being upset. You can write out, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. This person doesn't even like me. Write it all out. And then later, when you've calmed down, you can relook at this piece of paper or document that you've created and think, okay, does this actually make sense? And Also, is there anything familiar in this? Because another major point about this is that there are patterns that we are primed to see in the world based on our personal histories. So, for example, let's say I worked at a summer camp. I actually did, in reality, work at a summer camp as a teenager. But let's pretend when I was at that summer camp, I never felt that valued by my peers if I was really trying to contribute, but people didn't seem to notice. And that was an early work experience. Over time, as I have more experiences like that, especially as I perform the reflexive loop and I'm biased to see that in the world, I'm just more and more likely to have that be my interpretation of reality is, oh, see, people don't like me, people don't value me, etc. And as such, when you're looking at this draft that you wrote, you can think, are any of these things familiar patterns, things that I tend to believe about people or situations? And that could be good information to look at what can be called the delta, the gap between what was my story and what actually seems to be true. And there can be, okay, what are my patterns? Where do I tend to get upset, etc. And then actually talking to the person that I have a story about and checking that story. As I mentioned before, it can be, hey, what was going on for you there? Or, hey, I made up a story about what happened earlier. I have an assumption. I'd like to check it with you. And it could be that when you say, hey, I had this story that you didn't value what I was saying, the person might say, oh my goodness, no, I loved what you were saying. And maybe they confirm that I was wrong. Or maybe they say, actually, yeah, what you were saying, I thought completely missed the point about what we're trying to focus on here. And it would take us in a different direction and da-da-da. Well, if that happens, now I can have a conversation about it. Instead of me quietly being upset, thinking, well, they don't value this. Maybe we can start to compare our beliefs about the situation. Why is it that we have such different takes on this strategy or this proposition? And if you're from a culture, I want to acknowledge that some cultures in the world are more direct in terms of their communication styles, saying like, hey, it seemed like you were upset with me. Is that true? That could be totally fine and normal and preferred in a number of cultures. In some cultures, it's really not normal and maybe not advisable potentially. So if you are less comfortable with direct interaction or the people around you seem like they might be, try testing things out, get some sense of what seems to be helpful and what's less helpful. Some of these strategies you can do on your own, the working through the draft, the checking the ladder of inference, etc., and find a method that works well for you. As a final point, if you are a leader, then you have tremendous power in shaping the culture of your group, of your organization, because the leader sets the culture. And as a leader, if you are willing to say, hold on, I could be wrong here, I want to check, or I might be making an assumption and let's look at this, or can someone help me out? That means that those you lead are freed up. They are shown that it's okay to not be certain, to check your assumptions, acknowledge this might be wrong, let's double check. And when that happens, fewer errors occur in the systems created or the strategies overseen, because hold on, there might be something wrong here. There are actually fewer deaths and injuries in places like oil rigs, when these places that are very high risk physical situations, when there are cultures of people acknowledging when they don't feel safe, when they don't feel comfortable, because that leads to more safety checks, for example. So this could apply to any strategy in terms of having it be more safety proofed and assumption checked. Thank you so much for watching. In your homework, there's an assignment to practice this. Good luck, and All the best to you. Thanks, Kiwanis.